Once again, if you could kindly give our founding partners and panelists a warm round of applause as they exit the stage, and I hand over at this point to my colleague and friend, Marie-Angèle Touré.
Nous allons remercier une fois de plus nos distingués panélistes pour le partage de leurs précieuses perspectives. Et nous allons poursuivre bientôt les discussions avec un nouveau panel. Nous attendons quelques instants que la scène soit à nouveau disponible. La cérémonie, je précise, se poursuit. Je vois que certaines personnes sont en train de se lever dans la salle. Les discussions se poursuivent. Nous allons bientôt entamer un nouveau panel, de nouvelles discussions, avec notamment le concours de la modératrice du second panel de cette cérémonie d'ouverture, spécialiste des relations internationales et correspondante de CNN à Paris, Mélissa Bell, que je vous demande d'accueillir chaleureusement si vous arrivez à m'entendre. Merci à vous pour votre attention. Mélissa Bell qui va nous rejoindre pour la suite des discussions.
And while we're just getting set, I would like to use this opportunity to recognize the presence, the powerful presence of several governors from Nigeria, the governor of Kaduna State, Senator Ubasani, the governor of Kwara State, Abdurrahman Abdurrazak, the governor of Plateau State, His Excellency Caleb Muftwang, the governor of Lagos State, His Excellency Babajide Sanwo-Olu, who we saw a few moments ago, and the governor of Katsina State, His Excellency Diko Rada. Thank you very much for being with us today. And over to our dear moderator of this distinguished panel. Over to you.
How do you do? It's nice to meet you.
It's a wonderful pleasure.
Nice to meet you. Sorry?
It's really a pleasure.
That's lovely. Lovely to meet you.
Alors, mesdames et messieurs, je vais vous demander de bien vouloir vous asseoir afin que nous puissions continuer les discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, I kindly invite you to take your seats so that we can pursue the ceremony, please. Have a seat. Thank you very much.
C'est vrai déjà? Alors qu'ils sont tous encore debout? I'll start ahead, yeah? Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'll just wait for everyone to have a seat.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats, particularly in the front row right over here. And to our left, we are running out of time. Time is of the essence, so please take your seats. Take your seats, please. Kindly take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. Members of the protocol team and security, kindly help us. Kindly take your seats. Thank you. Thank you very much. Members of the protocol team to the left, please ensure that everyone to my left here is seated. Javier, can you please help us right over here? Please tell them to take their seats. Please take your seats.
Mesdames et messieurs, une fois de plus, nous vous demandons de bien vouloir vous installer. S'il vous plaît, mesdames et messieurs, veuillez vous installer.
Please take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, particularly to the left, to our left over here, please, could you be seated? Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Melissa Bell, CNN's correspondent in Paris, and we're very happy to be partnering with the Africa Investment Forum. In just a minute, we're going to have a panel picking up on a few of the themes that were just raised in the last, and more specifically looking at the example of Morocco's green transition. First of all, a film, though.
From our cars to our planes, pieces of the world around us can be traced back to here, Morocco. For decades, the kingdom has been developing state-of-the-art manufacturing hubs, resilient supply chains, and green energy solutions. Morocco is now an industrial powerhouse. The country is a crucial gateway to international markets, home to 22 shipping ports, including this one, Tangier Med. It handles over 100 million tons of cargo in a single year, and that includes hundreds of thousands of cars. Morocco is the leading car manufacturer in Africa, with facilities like this one, the Renault Group factory in Tangier City, its first 100% carbon-free plant designed for zero emissions. Its rapidly growing $2 billion aeronautic industry is also fostering a carbon-free vision for its future. Renewable energy is big business in Morocco. The country has the capacity to produce 37% of its energy from renewables and is targeting 52% by 2030. Much of that comes from here, Noor Ouazzazate, the largest concentrated solar plant in the world. And here, the mountains of Tangier, where wind farms can help offset millions of tons of CO2. So, whether it's made in Morocco, connected by Morocco, or powered in Morocco, it's Morocco now.
So to discuss that further, I'd love to call to the stage Dr. Leila Ben Ali, who is the Moroccan Minister for Energy and the Energetic Transition, but also Mrs. Odile Renaud-Bassot, who's the President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Dr. Ben Ali, lovely to meet you. How do you do? Hello. Lovely to meet you. Do sit down. The idea is to have a fireside chat then, looking at specific examples of some of what you're going to be talking about here at this forum, which is how investment in a green transition works in practice. And I'd like you, perhaps, Dr. Ben Ali, to give us an idea, first of all, as you look at Morocco's ambitious plans that we got a sense of there in that film for that ecological green transition as the world moves to decarbonization. Those pretty formidable investments that are needed, some of the capital costs that you need to move towards renewables, how you're going about attracting foreign investment towards those.
Right, thank you so much, Melissa, for this very relevant question, how to attract foreign investment and how we can put in place innovative financing mechanisms and regulatory frameworks. And if you don't mind me, I mean, that's the very relevant question back in 1994, where we attracted the very first independent power producer in the region. I think it's less relevant in 2024 because, as you can see, I mean, from the beautiful movie that our investment ministry has put together, the train has left the station and we have checked all the boxes in terms of the reforming the regulation, making sure that we put in place a strong and independent regulator to ensure that the private sector, national and international, feels at ease in investing in energy infrastructure and more widely sustainable infrastructure in Morocco. And the reason why I'm saying that, I think earlier today I saw a slide that has been floating in this forum showing risk of default and risk of debt default in several countries, but including in Morocco, that is much lower than, I mean, I've worked in finance, so I've also managed to read those 300-page investment cases with very long chapters about country risk, currency risk, etc., I think today is very much less relevant. We have, if I take the example of Morocco, a country very much driven towards more than 3 to 4% economic growth in the business as usual case. And for us, and that's something that the president of the World Bank has mentioned in the annual meetings last year in Marrakesh, the international financial sector knows where Morocco is heading. Everything is very transparent. The opportunities are there, and I see some of our friends in the financial sector, they have a very clear view of the list of opportunities that we have here. So attracting the private sector, what we are doing, and especially with our friends at the EBRD and other multilateral development bank, is that we increase the de-risking of the existing opportunities that at the end of the day provide very stable rates of returns. It's becoming much more attractive to invest in a sustainable infrastructure in Morocco, including gas infrastructure, and that's a discussion that we were having with Odile over the last 3 years, because we made the case of why we want to invest in gas infrastructure and how it will enable us to win our energy transition, not only for Morocco, not only for Africa, but for the world.
In fact, so picking up on that, Odile Renaud-Bassot, let's speak very specifically about your bank's investments on the African continent. Until now, it's been much more focused on parts of Eastern Europe, for instance. Very specifically, you have a $200 million investment in Morocco's OCP, desalination plants that will come. What is your plan for the African continent in terms of diversifying your portfolio of investments? How big a proportion do you expect the African continent to represent?
So, thank you. First of all, very happy to be here, and I thank the hospitality of the Moroccan authorities and the African Development Bank and my good friend Lakina Desina. So, no, EBRD indeed historically has been created to deal with the post-Soviet countries, post-communist, post-wall, fallout of the Berlin Wall, and helping these countries to be market economies and to develop the private sector. So our DNA and really our mandate is to develop private sector, to facilitate market economy and so forth. And we've been doing that successfully in Eastern Europe, and in a number of countries, Central Asia, Caucasus, and so forth. We started to invest in the north of Africa in 2012, after the Arab Spring, and I think this has been also a success story. Our investment overall in North Africa, so Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Jordan, is around 12 billion euros, and part of it, a large chunk of it, is in the private sector, and to support the green transition. So I think that the idea for us is that we have our specific mandate, experience, know-how in terms of what is needed to develop the private sector, and this is converging very much with the priorities of the governments in Africa, in the sub-Saharan Africa, and that's why we thought it would be very relevant to contribute, to bring our as I was saying, know-how, to start investing in this region. And we selected a number of countries which are, south of Sahel, so 6 countries in which we will start as of 2025, with the idea, and the notion of partnership was very much mentioned in the first session. I think our idea is really to come in partnership and to work in partnership with others. We've already started a strategic partnership with the African Development Bank to support SMEs, and develop a specific offer for SMEs, but we are really willing to work with all our partners in the region.
Dr. Ben Ali, the next question to you may be, how will the Moroccan government then balance attracting foreign investment even as you pursue encouraging local skills, the development of local talents, skills transfers, in order to make that mix and to push forward with this green transition? How do you achieve that balance?
Yeah, I think it's a $1 million question for any middle-income country like Morocco that is again, trying to help the world to solve the biggest challenge of this century, which is climate change, while at the same time working on its own sustainable development path. So we, as you have seen, we've decentralized political decision-making, and very grateful for Odile for reminding us of some of the important moments of this region's history. I mean, the 2011 Arab Spring that has changed a lot of things in the region, but in the case of Morocco, has really provided that the importance of decentralizing the decision-making process as much as possible to the region. So we have 12 regions, and that's very much relevant to how we conduct the screening and the financing of investment opportunities at the very regional level. I mean, those of you who have worked with us on investment opportunities in Morocco know that the role of the regional authority is very important. So it's very much, it comes from the grassroots requirements of the population, from a social perspective and an economic perspective. If you take at the macro level, I'll just give you a couple of numbers. Just in a business as usual case, if I just want to keep the lights on here, not taking into account any fancy additional investments in new technologies, or the fact that we are organizing the Football World Cup in 2030, or additional investments that would go into green hydrogen and its derivatives, we need to invest $1 billion to $1.5 billion a year in the energy sector only, just to keep the lights on. It means that in some parts of the value chain, if I take the grids, for example, we need to multiply the pace of investments by 5, starting in 2021. So the whole, and renewable energy, I mean, you've seen a couple of examples here, we need to multiply the pace of annual investments by 3, just in power generation, including renewables. So this gives you an idea of actually the change in the mindset of the whole administrative apparatus in the central level and also at the very regional and territorial level just to keep the lights on. So when I say just to keep the lights on, it means a totally de-risked investment opportunity including for the private sector. So that's why we're working with our partners. For example, on the grids, we have a wide array of opportunities, including linking south to north, linking additional grid reinforcements. All these investment opportunities are very much detailed for everyone. And I think that the last point that I would want to make on that front is related to the fact that our national strategy for sustainable development has been done and updated so that we take into account in a very inclusive manner the needs and requirements of the population, including the 5 million of Moroccans that live outside of Morocco who also have a say in the sustainable development of the country, including on things like carbon taxes or incentives and taxes for sustainability. And we do all that so that at the end of the day, Morocco really becomes that and strengthen the position of Morocco as that corridor linking Africa, Europe, and the Atlantic Basin, because we strongly believe that if the world wants to exist still and produce growth, produce GDP for the economists in the room, Africa, I mean, China, Southeast Asia, Latin America are peaking in terms of productive capacity for the world. The last beacon of productive capacity is Africa after the middle of this century. So if we want to unlock the countries, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, we need to be serious about sustainable energy infrastructure in Morocco.
I think that's a really interesting point about the potential of the African continent that's yet to be unlocked. And to that point, I'd like to ask you, for private investors, what you would say some of the challenges, some of the opportunities are for those who are looking to help unlock some of that potential by investing in the African continent, in your experience?
So I will start by the opportunities, because I really believe that, and it was very much said very, eloquently at the first session, in particular by the president of the African Development Bank. The continent is a continent of huge opportunities in terms of growth potential. If there is, Leila was talking about where growth will come in the next, 10 years. And I think that growth will come from large part of the growth in the world will come from the African continent. We work in a number of countries where the challenge is a decrease of the population, migration, a lot of, really decreasing population with all the challenge it creates in terms of investment capacities, aging population and so forth. Africa is the opposite. That's where you have a huge population growth, which creates its own challenges and the need to create jobs and so forth, but it's also a huge potential. Then you have the natural resources. I think the potential for Africa to become the energy hub for a large part of the world is huge, and the shift in the energy source and so forth is a huge opportunity for Africa. The technological capabilities, and we often talk about the leapfrog in a number of African countries to high-tech system immediately without going to the whole infrastructure, telecom, and so forth. So I think this is also this capacity to move ahead very quickly and jump on the new technologies and so forth. This is, in my view, a huge potential. So all this is big asset for the continent. There are some challenges and that's where MDBs and international financial institutions can help, but also government. I think the business environment, the size of the informal economy, the need to create more stable and more transparent business environment. This is, it depends country by country, but I think that's an important element where further progress are needed in a number of countries. And this will help changing the perception of risk. And I think indeed that the issue of the risk perception is a reality where we need to work upon publishing that data, being more transparent about the risk, and I think MDBs have contributed with the publication of the GEMS data showing, giving concrete figures about what has been the experience of different institutions in Africa. This is very important. The preparation of bankable projects is also very important, and in that respect, having a clear pipeline, support for project preparation, having a clear strategy. I think in Morocco, the example we discussed and was presented about the energy strategy is very important because it shows that if you have a very clear, credible pathway, you know what is the objective, you know where the government wants to go, then you know what are the investments needed, and you have clarity about how it will develop. This is very important because it gives confidence and investors know that they are there for the long run. The strategy will not shift in the next year, and so it creates an environment which is conducive for investment. Of course, risk sharing, investment of MDBs can also be elements to reassure. We very often play the role of anchor investor. We work a lot on project preparation. We invest a lot in selecting the project, choosing the partners, and so forth. But then when we are there, very often it's a sign of successful reassuring private investors. So I think that's, but also, having a regulatory framework that is open for private investment. I think in the area of renewable energy, you have a lot of countries now moving from, and this is the case also here, from purely public sector investment to attracting private developers that will invest in renewable and be able to grow the activity there.
Fascinating. That idea of a very concrete framework, the path, the visibility that it gives to investors, that is specifically what Morocco has very clearly outlined under your leadership, Dr. Ben Ali. On the question, for instance, of the roadmap of Morocco, you have a very clear plan by 2030, 52% of renewables in your energy mix. How do you go about very concretely attracting the capital investments, which are huge, that you need to achieve that very ambitious target in what is a fairly ambitious time?
Well, a couple of things there. First, Morocco's energy strategy has not changed since 2009 when it was launched by His Majesty. And Odile knows this story very well. It's based on a very simple triangle. Renewable energy, the target changes. It was 42% before 2020, 52% before 2030, and we are pretty much confident that we'll reach that 52% of installed capacity well before 2030. Because the very first 40% are the most difficult to get, and the most difficult to learn the lessons to attract different pockets of capital with very different risk appetites to build the sort of projects that you've seen like Nur-Zazat and a few others. And now, I think also Odile made an excellent point about leapfrogging. There will be a combination of hybrid models. I mean, the model of energy infrastructure that we had in the 20th century has reached its limits, and it's definitely reaching its limits in the case of a continent like Africa with very diverse investment opportunities. So you will have a mix of centralized generation, decentralized generation, leapfrogging to new forms of energy, but also making sure that more than 600 million people in Africa who do not have access to energy have access to modern forms of energy, making sure that the gas resources that we have in the continent are being properly monetized. So that's very important that the financial sector and the insurance sector work together with governments like Morocco to decrease cost of capital as much as possible. And that will come with, that's how we have been doing it in Morocco to, especially for the first 40% of renewables that were more difficult to install, is a hybrid model where we worked with our friends in MDBs, in commercial banks, in sovereign pockets of capital as well, and also some private equity more and more. So today, it's very important that we, together as an energy minister, I only care about the cost of the electrons delivered. It has to be minimized as much as possible because the industries, the Moroccans, and also our fellow citizens in the rest of Africa want to have access to affordable energy, clean energy and affordable energy. It's very important. Second key pillar of our triangle is energy efficiency. That's another area where we are working very hard to reach a 20% energy efficiency target again before 2030. That also means a total change of mindset in terms of incentivizing the consumers and being able, and I don't want to get too much into the details, but we were able to deliver incentives for the first time in Morocco directly to the consumers. Third key pillar of our energy strategy that has not changed since 2009, so very stable, and I don't think it will change in the foreseeable future, is regional integration. Because we strongly believe that to decrease, I mean, there are many arguments for that, but to decrease the cost of capital, to decrease the cost of energy delivered for our social and economic tissues, we have to integrate regional markets. Morocco is the only African country today that is interconnected with Europe and the Atlantic Basin, electricity-wise and gas-wise. And mind you, there was a foreign affairs minister who told me once, oh, you did it so that it becomes bi-directional linking, it gives a lot of hedging. Yes, indeed. We need to ensure that that connectivity is being strengthened. So that's why we have been pushing for a vision of Morocco as what we call an OTC corridor, which means that any electrons, any molecule, any product originating, transiting, or being certified, we talked a lot about regulation, being certified in Morocco is green and sustainable in the wider sense, in the definition of sustainability that Africa is having, including, of course, governance aspects, human rights aspects, access to affordable and clean energy aspects as well. So I don't want to get too much into the details, but these are the three key pillars of our energy strategy that has not changed since 2009.
And Dr. Ben Ali, we're going to come back to that place that Morocco has as a sort of green hub on the African continent, but between Europe and Africa as well in a moment. But you touched on something I'd like to put to you Odile Renaud-Basso, and that is the question of the many different actors that are involved, right, in any green transition. You as a European bank looking to invest on the African continent, to increase the position of the continent within your investment portfolio, who do you speak to? Governments, local banks, agencies? What mix of interlocuteurs are you finding, and who are you speaking to here on this continent?
I mean, I think we need to speak, and we speak with everybody. We speak with the government because, as I was saying, the strategy, the legal framework, the policy objectives are very important. Very often, also, you have state-owned enterprise which play an important role. I think only about the grid. In many countries, the grid, energy, electricity grid is owned by a state-owned enterprise. So these are one of the key partners we work with, but also private investors, and we work a lot with companies, energy sector companies, ready, willing to invest in a number of countries. From, I mean, Gulf area, you have big partners, Aqua, Mazda, but also European companies expanding, you know, willing to invest in developing renewable and local joint venture. So really, who is willing to, I mean, companies who are interested in investing in the green transition, and it can be intergeneration, but also we see more and more in the interest in investing in grids, which are very important in order to absorb more renewable capacities. But we work also a lot with the banks, because part of the green transition is not only to generate this sort of energy, but energy efficiency, and having all players in the economy, SMEs, corporate, manufacturing companies, embracing and taking into account the necessity to have energy efficiency, taking into account the global environment, and I think in a number of countries, CBAM, for example, which is a new European carbon border adjustment mechanism that will enter into force in 2026, is also an important incentive for some sectors of the economy, hard to abate industry, that have to take that into account because they will be subject to this mechanism. So all the players, and in a way, with all the clients we have in the country, and a lot of them are purely private, we bring this issue of how you can increase energy efficiency, how you can develop yourself renewable energy source so as to be able to be more competitive in this new environment. So it's really, we also, I mean, one of the dimensions is also household, and we develop some facilities for household to be aware of how they can improve their own personal access to energy or be more efficient in their own home system. So it's really multidimensional, and for us it's something we, in every project, working with everybody, we bring this concern and this priority to be ready for the green and contribute to the green transition.
So profoundly collaborative. Back to the Moroccan example, you mentioned Norwar Zazat a moment ago. You have created here, of course, the largest solar panel plant in the world. I'd like you, Minister, to tell us a little bit about what the lessons of that construction were, but also what your hopes are going forward, going back to the question of Morocco as this sort of green hub for the transfer and export of renewables to the rest of the African continent, for instance. So 2 questions in one, really.
Yeah, I'll try. I'll try, Melissa. I think it's an excellent point you're making, linking a specific project and a specific technology to the investment strategy of a country. Because at the end of the day, I think we are at a very important moment in the energy transition, something similar to what happened probably in the 70s, where, or actually back in 2009, when you have a geopolitical bloc that decided to put subsidies, at the end of the day, taxpayer money or indirectly, into a specific technology, say solar PV, and that has decreased the costs dramatically. And I think we are today, in 24, at a similar moment where you have a number of major geopolitical blocs putting, as much as possible, research and development and project application money into energy transition technologies, including storage, including batteries, including electric mobility, and so on. So I think one of the key lessons that Morocco has learned from the development of Norway Zazat is being humble, first. Technologies changes, there is a technology risk that we have to take into account definitely, and we will need to be agile and nimble enough in our strategies and project preparation to cater for those increasingly fast pace of technology changes, because you have a large number of investors and governments injecting, let's say it, subsidies and incentives in specific technologies. And the other, I think, key lesson that we learned from Norway Zazat is how, and is I think very useful to the corridor question, is how to ensure that we attract research and development in specific parts of the value chain so that we can also manage that technology risk. So Morocco is, I mean, beyond being the corridor between Africa and Europe, is also a land of reconciliation, let's say it, between the US and China. So for us, and when I speak to our American counterparts or our Chinese counterparts, I say, well, if we are all really serious about this global energy transition, those subsidies, those incentives, be it Inflation Reduction Act or Chinese investments in R&D, in storage or artificial intelligence or whatever, or grid management, some of those will have to be extraterritorial. Some of those investments will have to be put in countries like Morocco that could be the land of reconciliation in total transparency for that research and development. For those of you who are staying a bit more, I encourage you to go to Ben Guerir, where we have our green energy park and platforms and research and development centers on renewable energy. Very important to visit that. But I think that's the point that I would want to raise, is making sure that that we don't stay focused on traditional investments in power generation if we want to win this energy transition, and get beyond that to research and development and some additional risk appetite on the technology side. I'm not saying we should forget about the political risk or currency risk, but at least let's mitigate together the technology risk.
Perhaps to close, Odile Renaud-Bassot, because we're running out of time, and just picking up very briefly on something that you said earlier. We've been talking about the Africa Investment Forum created to scale up investments. You're very involved in these changes towards these green transitions being operated on the continent. How confident are you that the African continent can be a leader in this respect, that it is heading on the right trajectory?
No, I'm confident that the continent is on the right trajectory. There is work to do, I think, but there is, as I mentioned, as it was said, a lot of opportunities, and I think that the green transition is a huge opportunity. It comes with some cost and some need for funding and some need for support, but it's also a huge opportunity to shift and to become this energy hub I was mentioning. And I think that the human capital, the demographic potential, and as I was saying, the technology is also there to create these opportunities for investment. And at a time where other parts of the world are growing more slowly, and growth potential is reducing, I think investing in Africa is really an opportunity to, and it needs, as I was saying, it needs some work, it needs some efforts also from all the countries or the clients and so forth, but it will be a huge opportunity to also have high return. So for investors, risk and return is always the good balance, but I think that there is a lot of opportunity here.
Which is a perfect message on which to end this panel. Thank you so much, Odile Renaud-Bassot and Dr. Leila Ben Ali. Thank you very much.
To our very distinguished panelists, Her Excellency Dr. Leila Ben Ali, Odile Renaud-Bassot, and to our very able moderator, Melissa Bell, thank you very much for truly enriching this very robust conversation this morning. Thank you very much appreciated. Kindly give our panelists and our moderator a warm round of applause.